Hello, Michael Swain here at Bill Schneider Stadium in Manhattan, Kansas. Heading out after KU football's 47-27 loss to Kansas State on the road. It closes out KU's 2022 regular season. Year 2 of the Lance Leipold era is nearing its close, and as I'm leaving here, I'm kind of left with one question. Has KU shown progress in this Sunflower Showdown rivalry? And as I've thought about it, talking to Lance Leipold players and just thinking about it personally, it's hard to tell. This is a game that KU was in for periods, and I think it's one of these deals where you look at the consistency of this football team over the last 6 weeks, and they've had moments, but they've really not been able to put it all together, kind of outside of that Oklahoma State game coming off the bye week. And I think it's hard not to look at special teams when you want to talk about this game. The muff punt from O.J. Burrows sets the tone, and then the kickoff from Trevor Wilson, returning it out of the end zone, tackled at the 10-yard line. A flag moves it to the 5-yard line, and then there's a safety. It turns out to be a 9-point swing in the game. KU goes down 23-7, and from there it's tough sledding. This is not a team that you can get down to. Kansas State is going to play for a Big 12 title for a reason. They're a really, really good football team, and you can't hand them points. And KU is not in a position where it can be handing good teams like Kansas State points and still expect to win. And so I think even after that stretch, though, I think there were times when you felt like Kansas was in this game. At halftime, you're looking at the score and thinking, okay, KU comes out, gets the ball out of the half, they can score, maybe get some momentum and keep going. But every single time Kansas got momentum, Kansas State made a big play, and KU just could not get a stop. They turned the ball over with the fumble there in the second half. Just the moments that KU needed to come through in the clutch, they just weren't able to. I think that's a lot of the issues that you've seen with Kansas so far this season. It's a little bit like the Baylor game in terms of the inability to get a stop when you really needed to shift the momentum. It's got little bits of the Texas Tech game and the Oklahoma game in terms of the inconsistent offense. The offensive performance was so interesting because obviously Jalen Daniels, I thought, played a lot better than he did against Texas last week. And yet, in the second half, there's just no offense anywhere to be found. Over the first 15 minutes of the game, KU scores 21 points. You take away the safety, and, they've got 3 touchdowns on 4 drives, and that's even with the safety. And so I think overall, you look at the offense, and as a truck goes by me, you look at the offense, and it did nothing the first 15 minutes of the game. But then over the final 7 drives, you only total 110 yards of offense, and you average about 3 yards per play. It just looks like a totally different team, and I think Kansas State made some adjustments there coming out of halftime, really limited what KU can do, and then at that point, the defense can't do much, right? They're on the field for so long. KU had so many 3-and-outs in the second half. No offensive momentum at all, and it becomes a rout after that. So again, I'm left with the question, did Kansas show improvement against Kansas State? And it's just hard to answer because this is the best Kansas State team in a decade. And even if this is the best Kansas team in a decade, it's still a young team. And I think maybe that gets lost in this sometimes, that, hey, KU can return so much of it's too deep. You're going to lose Earl Bostic, the starting left tackle. You're going to lose a lot of your interior depth, defensive tackle, and KU's going to look to replenish that in the transfer portal. But there are so many positives, I think, out of a season like this, that even a result like this, as sour as it may be, it's hard to answer the question, has Kansas closed the gap? I think next year we'll know a lot more about that, because I think traditionally Kansas State has been really good in the trenches. Well, what can a Kansas team next season do when they return all this talent and maybe Kansas State doesn't have the best team that they've had in a decade? Things I'm left wondering. Regardless, I think it's been a successful season, a season that I don't think anyone expected going into the year. I think Lance Leipold hinted at that post-game, saying that at any point early in the season, if you had said KU is sitting here at 6-6 after this game, that he would have taken it. The program's heading in the right direction. It's just kind of a question now of, what steps can they take forward over this offseason to fix those consistency issues that have plagued this team so much over the last really 7 weeks, if you want to go back to that TCU game. that's kind of the next step now for the program. And it's interesting that, too, we're not talking about the next step being, can Kansas get Big 12 worthy players, or can they get players you can win with? You can win with a lot of these players. It's now just a question of, can you as a team improve? And I think these bowl practices will help a lot in doing that. So those are some of my quick thoughts. Obviously, stay tuned to fog.net. We've got all sorts of content up. You want to see what Lance Leipold had to say, we've got that all transcribed for you. I wrote a bit about kind of just the overall performance, the defense, the third downs. That's just a confounding issue. KU is just so bad on third longs this season. I'm sure I'll have to write about this a little bit more heading into the bowl game, but we've got plenty of content up. Obviously, check back the YouTube channel. Podcast coming on Sunday with Kevin Flaherty, but regardless, good season for KU. It's going to end on a sour note, but there's still a lot to be encouraged by with this program under Lance Leipold, and not to mention there's the contract extension too for Leipold. So continuity will be there, and the offseason will be huge. But as always, we'll have you covered at fog.net.